Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our event today. To start with our event, I would like, just before we introduce our speakers and why we are here today, just to explain to the participants that ISL interpretation is available at all times during the meeting without the need to select any interpretation option. Live captioning is also available by clicking the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. And the meeting, with your permission, will be recorded for future dissemination purposes. So we hope that is okay for everybody. I would like first to take the chance to thank very much our partner and member, UNDP, for their joint efforts with us to put this event together and share with you our learning today. Also, I would like to thank our partners that were essential to group the thinking around what we are presenting and being part of the organization and presentation today, starting, of course, with the International Disability Alliance and the International Center for Evidence in Disability and Atlas Alliance. And of course, we couldn't be here today without the sponsorship of the Australian government, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So great thanks to them as well for being with us today and sponsoring our event. As you all know, our event today is one of the key events that are organized towards the Global Disability Summit. It's a key milestone for all of us. The Global Disability Summit in 2019 started to bring more attention to the disability inclusion more globally, and our ambition altogether that this year is going to take it even to a higher level. And that's why we are really very keen today to present to you our key learning as UNPRPD from our work the last year and a half following the new strategy we adopted, because we really believe together along our partners, the concepts and ideas and innovation practices that we have done at country level will hopefully inform future thinking when it comes to the importance of gathering data to inform programming and services. We have been always challenged to try to understand how to inform policies, reforms around CRPD implementation and SDG realization for persons with disabilities in a way that is context relevant, in a way that is participatory and inclusive of all actors at national level. We at BRPD, along our partners, we took the attempt with the new strategy to follow the approach that we are presenting today. And we are so excited to have you with us to learn from our partners on the ground and our experts on what we did, what is the learning and what can be adopted. Without further ado, I would like to start the agenda with the opening remarks of our distinguished speakers, starting with Ms. Siv Catherine Moe, Minister Council of the Permanent Mission of Mission in the United Nations. And I would like to give you the floor, Siv, to start our event. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ola, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure and a great honor for me to give these opening remarks at such an important event. I'm also pleased to represent a country that gives high priority to inclusion of persons with disabilities, both nationally and in our development cooperation. We are honored to be hosting the Global Disability Summit together with Ghana later this month. Realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and their ambition of leaving no one behind is the main aim of Norway's development cooperation. Human rights cut across all our work. The Sustainable Development Goals can only be reached, and stable, equal societies can only be achieved with a concerted effort to include persons with disabilities. At the Global Disability Summit, which will take place in 2 weeks' time, we will take stock of progress since 2018 and commit to further action. When implementing and delivering on our commitments, it's important to learn from best practices and exchange experiences. The ongoing work of the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities offers many valuable insights and lessons. The UNPRPD has an important role in connecting the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy to concrete action at the country level for the realization of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In this meeting, I look forward to learning more about the tools and approaches developed. We will launch Norway's strategy for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in development cooperation at the Global Disability Summit. The strategy frames how we will work towards the Sustainable Development Goals and support implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities through our development cooperation. First of all, the strategy will be based on a human rights approach to disability inclusion, putting the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities at its center. 3 strategic areas are of particular significance to ensure a human rights-based approach and to guide disability inclusion. First, tackling stigma and harmful beliefs is crucial to combating discrimination across all sectors and areas of work. Second, meaningful participation and engagement of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations is vital. Participation and engagement is a right in itself. It also creates more diverse spaces that fosters acceptance and reduces harmful beliefs. Moreover, it informs policies and actions that improve the quality and relevance of interventions and efforts. Third, a human rights-based approach must be underpinned by accountability. This means knowing what the situation and challenges are, what is being done, and by who. Tracking our efforts and fostering better data and statistics are important tools, both for informing best approaches and to hold duty bearers accountable. From Norway's ongoing support, I would like to highlight the Together for Inclusion Consortium as an example of meaningful engagement in development cooperation. Led by the Atlas Alliance, the project is unique in that organizations of persons with disabilities themselves are at the head of cooperation with civil society development organizations to drive change. Efforts to make persons and children with disabilities visible and counted is something we continue to pursue with a host of partners. In particular, through our cooperation with UNICEF, we continue to support improved data disaggregation. We also support the Center of Excellence for Data on Children with Disabilities. Meetings like this one are important to help guide us and our partners in the way forward to implement the CRPD and achieve the SDGs. I would like to thank everyone who contributes to this event and look forward to hearing more on the experiences and lessons learned. Your work is important for making the commitments at the Global Disability Summit lead to real change in the lives of persons with disabilities. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Siv. Norway has been a core supporter to BRPD since establishment, and we look forward to continue the collaboration with you in the near future around the summit commitment and beyond, because as you said, it is a great moment for everybody, and we are very keen to advance the agenda forward with all relevant partners. Without further ado, I would like now to introduce Mr. Holian Chu, the Assistant Administrator and Director of Bureau for Policy and Program at UNDP, and also the Chair of UNPRPD. Holian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ola. Thank you very much, Sif, for taking time and making the introductory remarks. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to deliver these opening remarks for this Global Disability Summit satellite event. UNDP led the conceptualization and operationalization of the UN Partnership for the Rights of Persons with Disability, multi-partner trust fund in 2011, and since then has been hosting the technical secretariat of the UNPRPD, and is its current policy board chair. As chair of the policy board of the UNPRPD, MPTF, let me begin by expressing our gratitude to the technical secretariat of the UNPRPD and all colleagues from UN partner agencies, and also our partner organizations for their efforts in the organization of this event. I would like to particularly thank the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway as long-standing donors of the UNPRPD Trust Fund for their co-sponsoring of this event. And also, I would like to thank our panelists joining us to advance the conversation around evidence-based programming for the disability inclusion and the progressive realization of the rights of persons with a disability. So, dear colleagues, through more than 30 joint programs globally, UNPRPD has generated significant changes towards a more inclusive society and witnessed the steps forward made in the disability inclusion landscape since the establishment of the UNPRPD in 2011. Yet, countries still struggle to transform the provision of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities into concrete policies, systems, and services. Understanding what the main bottlenecks and the priorities are in each country in relation to the fulfillment of the CRPD is a key initial step to overcome this difficulty. We also need to understand who the key stakeholders are, what capacities they may need to improve, and what ongoing development processes needed to become more disability inclusive. A strong emphasis on evidence generation, learning, and the need for situational analysis is what drives the UNPRPD's new strategic operational framework for 2020-2025. This analysis should focus on essential preconditions that are indispensable for addressing the needs and opportunities of people with disabilities in public policy making and the programming across all sectors. The UNPRPD has also developed a guidance tool for conducting situation country analysis of the rights of persons with disabilities that is currently being rolled out in 26 countries. The guidance tool builds on a human rights-based understanding of change, where empowerment and participation of persons with disabilities and their families are seen as key preconditions, along with sufficient capacity and authority of duty bearers to fulfill their obligations to advance the rights of persons with disabilities. UNDP, on behalf of the UNCT, has led the UNPRPD situation analysis in 11 of the 26 countries, and the findings are telling. In Guatemala, the analysis highlighted significant challenges related to poor capacity of organizations of persons with disabilities to drive the implementation of the CRPD. UNDP, together with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the United Nations Population Fund, will therefore implement capacity development activities in order to create an independent and capable institutional mechanism to supervise the progressive achievement of the CRPD. In Rwanda, the analysis allowed to identify challenges related to limited participation of OPDs in the planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of national programs. UNDP with UNICEF and the UN Women as partner agencies. We will therefore work to build the capacity of national stakeholders to jointly develop, implement, monitor, and evaluate disability inclusion programs guided by CRPD and the SDGs. Not any evidence, but inclusive evidence gathered through inclusive, accessible processes should serve as basis for CRPD-oriented country programming and decision-making. As we approach the Global Disability Summit, I would also like to stress that the pledge we will bring forward during the 2020 GDS will ensure continuity with the commitments made by UNDP at the 2018 GDS, while accounting for the challenges of persons with disabilities that have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the words of our Secretary General, upholding the rights of persons with disability is not only a moral imperative, but also a recognition of rights and a practical necessity if we are to build sustainable societies. I would like to end by thanking once again all of the colleagues behind the organization of this event and for facilitating the discussion around this crucial theme. So thank you very much again. Look forward to a fruitful discussion. If I have to leave early for other events, I apologize first, but my colleagues will stay in this conference. And thank you again. Over to you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Holian. And okay, so now we are going to start with the presentation of the findings from our situational analysis, but also reflection on why did we do it and why it was important to us and what we saw as really working around it. I would like to share with you some slides that we will be presenting to you in relation to the core of the importance of our event today. So to start with, just a brief introduction of our new strategy that was adopted in 2020. As I said earlier, the importance of our strategy was that we really wanted to work at the heart of the countries to ensure that our work is really contributing to national changes and sustainable obtainment of rights for the persons with disabilities. So one key component of the outcomes we wanted to achieve is really increasing the capacities of national stakeholders. And when we talk about the national stakeholders, we really wanted to look into a comprehensive view around that, considering government actors, organizations of persons with disabilities, and the UN country teams to collectively understand what are the key issues, what are the key gaps, but also what are the key understandings around transforming the commitments around CRPD and SDG when it comes to disability rights at country level. We also wanted to make sure that our core contribution at country level contributes to filling the gaps around achieving and realizing CRPD implementation. Because that is really very key. We have achieved a lot at country level in terms of government's ratification of the convention, yet we know that still there are many challenges at country level to translate that into action. And that's why the new strategy tried to put in place mechanisms to make that happen in a way that is collectively advanced by all actors at national level with our support. And the third component, which is very essential also to contribute to national changes, is trying to influence the broader national development plans and humanitarian actions, because we know once disability is missed from those actions, we will unfortunately continue to look at disability as an ad hoc small-scale interventions that are not sustainable and not contributing to realizing the rights of persons with disabilities at longer term. In 2020, we also launched a call for proposal that responded to the new strategy. And we were very keen to develop that call for proposal around the essential direction of the strategy to advance both the implementation of CRPD, but also try to influence the SDG realization for persons with disabilities. Of course, we couldn't miss that the COVID-19 had a great influence and impact negatively, unfortunately, on the rights and well-being of persons with disabilities on the ground. That's why it was a cross-cutting focus of our call for proposal that went out to countries. We were very fortunate that we had 110 countries responding to the call. And that was very promising for us, indicating that countries are very keen to advance the agenda on the rights of persons with disabilities. And to start supporting those applications, we had resources to move forward with 26 countries. And at the induction phase, based on our new strategy, we supported countries to implement an induction training for all stakeholders to put everybody on the same understanding around the concepts. Yet also we put in place a framework on the situational analysis, which we are focusing our work and presentation with you today, because we wanted our programs to be informed by collective understanding on the gaps at country level, collectively agreeable by every actor at country level that is relevant to our programs on the direction of our programs, but also making sure that at the heart of all this process, that participation of organizations of persons with disabilities is very key in all the stages to ensure that their voice is heard and they are considered as a key actor and implementer in the program once we have agreement on the implementation as well. The slides I'm putting forward now is just presenting briefly the countries that have moved forward in the implementation of the 26 programs that are starting action in a few weeks. And we are hopeful that this year we will have additional resources to move forward with additional countries as well. In terms of the situational analysis, just a snapshot of why we have designed it and how it came forward. As we explained earlier, it's really meant to help understand the main bottlenecks and priorities in each country in relation to the fulfillment of the CRPD, but it's also meant to inform the design of future cross-sector programming for possible funding from us. But we also hoped that, and we will discuss this further later, to serve as a baseline for all national actors beyond our purpose, because we understand that data gap continues to be a challenge at country level, and we are hopeful that our approach will help to contribute to filling that gap. And I will not go into details in terms of the key questions, but we really wanted to make sure that, as I said, that it is a participatory process, looks at a comprehensive view of the country realities, and collectively understand what needs to be done now to transform the realities into a better condition. In terms of the approaches we used to analyze the data that was gathered, our strategy looks at the center of analysis, trying to understand the situation in terms of national policies and systems across all sectors. But as I said earlier, it looks at development and humanitarian action plans. It made sure that the analysis looks at the cross-cutting approaches, meaning addressing equality of all most marginalized groups in terms of access and engagement, looking at the gender issues, how far women and girls' rights are addressed in national policies and systems, but of course, looking at the cornerstone, how far organizations of persons with disabilities are at the center of understanding how they're involved in national processes, how we are making sure they're involved in our future programming as well. And the essential preconditions that we looked at across all the sectors looked at equality and non-discrimination, inclusive services, accessibility, CRPD compliant budgeting, and accountability and governance. So these are the main framework areas that we looked at when we designed the framework to understand what really works and what is needed to be done at country level. Now I would like to hand in the floor to our colleague Annika Nilsson, who has been at the cornerstone working with us in the previous phase and will continue with us as well in the near future to work on this framework to advance it even further at country level. But today she's sharing with you the key findings and reflections that came along from the data that we gathered from the 26 countries. Annika, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will start by summarizing the key findings, and they focus on the gaps. We also heard in the situation analysis about some progresses, but this focus will be on the gaps. So next slide, please. The analysis started with the stakeholder analysis, and it was very clear from across all 26 countries that produced reports that mostly the responsibility is with the ministries of social welfare, who often have a low status and limited budgets. And this was seen as a gap in many countries. All 26 countries mentioned that coordination mechanisms, either they didn't exist or they were paper tigers, not working, not effective, and not having mandate or budgets. Countries indicate that this is something which is key for things to work better in implementation. They call for disability focal points within government, both at the central and local levels, and much better coordination between development partners, civil society, and also OPDs. More unified voice of OPDs is called for. And we also noticed well in this stakeholder analysis that often distinction is not made clearly between the roles and mandates of CSOs who are service providers and OPDs. So that was an issue in many countries as well. So then we went on in the situation analysis to look at the various preconditions. Next slide. So we looked at the equality and non-discrimination, inclusive service delivery, accessibility, CRPD compliant budgeting, and accountability and governance. And under each of these headings, there were some key findings. On equality and non-discrimination, we found that new CRPD compliant disability laws and policies were largely in place. Countries that have ratified the convention had gone ahead to legislate. The problem was the implementation of these laws, not that they didn't exist. There were, however, some legal gaps. Very often the mental health legislation did not fulfill CRPD compliance, and many countries had forgotten to reform the old laws, which were now contradicting the new disability law. So those were key gaps. And the implementation of these laws are generally weak across all countries. And the main reason pointed at is lack of coordination and capacity for enforcement, and the persistent stigma and medical view on disability, which is a serious obstacle to change. On accessibility, again, we found that legislation is increasingly in place. It looks quite good, but it's not implemented. There are no enforcement mechanisms. People are not held accountable, and contractors are not made to follow these laws. Next slide, please. On the precondition of inclusive services, all countries mention that there are weaknesses in the assessment system. Actually, there is no definition of disability that is really CRPD compliant in many countries. And eligibility criteria for various services are not clear. And some often assessment methods used are offensive, asking people to prove everything that they are unable to do, or really offensive classification in degrees of disabilities. And only 2 out of 26 countries had mentioned that they had somehow progressed to acceptable level. Also, we find that many countries still have segregated solutions, including institutionalization. It's a very tough process to move from institutionalization to community-based services. It's an ongoing process in most countries, but it's very slow. About the budgeting, all countries conclude that both national and donor budgets are completely insufficient to meet CRPD standards. Often less than 1% of sector budgets for health and education are set aside for disability inclusion, but often this is not even possible to know. Only segregated services are visible in budgets. And then the budgeting for reasonable accommodation, it's very rare that this is an explicit budget post, which means that it's always a struggle to find funds for this. Next slide, please. And accountability and governance, finally. Most governments and development partners, they don't have disaggregated objectives, targets, and indicators to monitor the effects of their interventions. There are, of course, the SDGs have some disaggregated indicators, but we found they are rarely reported on. So this is an issue about the actually being explicit about what you want to do and change for persons with disabilities. And we come back to this issue of the national statistical systems. They lack information on persons with disability, or they don't coordinate and use existing data. And this is partly due to the poor assessment systems where people are not identified, and the poor national survey systems. Of course, this lack of knowledge affects the ability to plan and budget properly. Human rights monitoring mechanisms and legal aid systems are still very weak in support of the rights of persons with disabilities. This is also across all the 26 countries. And finally, which you have mentioned already, that OPDs are not participating meaningfully in monitoring, but advocacy capacity is growing. There seems to be a vicious circle here in terms of their participation. I will return to that when we talk about the cross-cutting issues. Next slide, please. Okay. So meaningful participation of OPDs, it indicates a vicious circle of lack of provision of reasonable accommodation and limited OPD capacity to engage. So this is continuing. And persons with intellectual, psychosocial, and communication-related disabilities are left behind, also within the disability movement. And women and girls with disabilities are marginalized everywhere, including in the women and disability movements. And sexual and reproductive health violations is a key problem mentioned in many, many countries. And there is poor intersectionality in programming. It seems like only one vulnerability at a time can be considered by the donor programs. Yes. And in humanitarian context, disability is increasingly recognized. Disability is increasingly recognized as part of national development plans. So we can see them in context description and plans, but there's a lack of implementation monitoring mechanism, as mentioned. And the OPD representatives are seldom present in these SDG coordination bodies. The UN Sustainable Development Plans increasingly consider disability, but still insufficiently. Only 5 out of the 26 countries report to having inclusive disaster and emergency management plans. These countries refer to climate change as the cause of their natural disasters. Other 21 countries do not mention climate change in relation to disability in their analysis. The COVID-19 pandemic proved that emergency plans and measures were not disability sensitive and inclusive. The failures include inaccessible communication, withdrawal of essential services, forced isolation, etc., etc. At the same time, some new IT solutions provide an opportunity to build back better for persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. So what did we learn from this work with the 26 country situation analysis? We learned that it was an extensive process that countries had not experienced before. So it was a new experience, but we learned that it was very good for relationship building in many countries, bringing stakeholders together, which was one of the gaps, you know, the coordination. So it was worthwhile the effort. And it helped stakeholders understand prioritization and change processes, because we forced them to discuss gaps and opportunities and to formulate actionable recommendations, not only wish lists. Concerning the participation of OPDs in the process, it varied between countries, sometimes due to the COVID situation, but also we noted that engagement from marginalized groups was not equal. Regarding quality, we found that the reports had variable quality, depending on capacity, level of stakeholder engagement and COVID-19, but it was serving beyond our purpose. The recommendations from the analysis are now used in many places for other ongoing processes. And countries managed to complete the process with lessons learned about the country reality. We also found that involvement of the UN country team to guide and quality assure the consultants who worked at the country level was very important for quality and ownership. The recruitment of consultants with the right competencies at the same time as they had independence was really important, but not always easy to find. If you had the right competencies, you sometimes were very much involved in disability field and not always independent. So that was an issue. Technical gaps at country level required extra support. We noted that we needed to help out on definition of disability, definition of OPDs, understanding of the CRPD and inclusive SDGs. So we have had a very fruitful dialogue. The structure of and content of the situation analysis, it needs some revision in the next phase. We noted that some of the headings might need to be adjusted to be more helpful to countries. And also the guidelines need to be revised to respond to the most common problems experienced in methods and definitions. We were not prepared to know exactly where the problems would appear. Technical support, we provided tailored technical support to complement the induction trainings depending on capacity, and additional support on the log frames and results-based management. And we had some structured groups check-ins where countries can share their progress and lessons learned. So with this, I want to just give the floor back to Ola. We learned a lot in this situation analysis, and we note that the gaps we found look very similar to the Norwegian new strategy 3 priorities. Thank you for me.
Thank you so much, Annika, for your contribution. As you stated, the findings really confirms that there are unfortunately still huge gaps present at country level. We are very pleased that PRPD will be able to contribute to filling those gaps along other partners at country level. But as I said, the findings confirm that the core work of PRPD is really still needed massively at country level, and we hope to share with the audience in the near future what has been learned from the implementation phase of what came out as priorities and what based on our support in the programs. Without further ado, now I would like to give the floor to Monica Mack, who's the Executive Director of the Cambodian Disabled Persons Organization, to discuss their perspective in terms of meaningful participation of OPDs in the process. Monica, the floor is yours.
Saying hola and good morning, Excellencies, chairpersons, and organizing committee members, colleagues, and friends. Greeting from Cambodia. It is an honor for me to be invited for the speech of this very important event. More importantly, I'm excited to share with you how the CDPO, Cambodia Disabled People Organization in Cambodia, for Cambodia we've called OPD. It means Organization for Person with Disability and Person with Disability participant in the disability sectors, particularly in process for the situation analysis and how this process has set its stage for strategy action on disability inclusion in Cambodia. As until now, we have 75 OPDs and 11 among 75, we have 11 women and children with disability forum. CDPO and OPD has been involved in some UN joint programs like thin UNDP, UNICEF, and WHO joint program, 3 UN agencies. We call the jointly implementation the disability right in Initiative Cambodia. We call BRICS between December 2013 to March 2018. With the funding from DFA to MPTF, the program is contributed to the full Cambodia's committee toward implement on the CRPDs. Besides that, we have another joint program between UNDP and OHCHRs. We call the Access to Justice Without Barrier for Persons with Disability in the UNPRPD's fund in February 2018 until February 2021. The main point that this project, we are strengthening the capacity of the government authority to better implementation the CRPDs in the areas of access to justice and services for people with disability, and to enhance the disability network capacity to better advance the right of people with disability and assist them to seeking justice in 3 pilot provinces in that time. Through the UNPRPD round 4, CDPO have issued the supporting letter for the impression of interest, and during the inception phase, 5 stars and formers, our CDPO directors have worked with UNDPs and OHCHR to conduct the conduct instruction training on cross-cutting approach and preconception of disability inclusion development in July 2021. And we got 68 participants, include 30 women with disability, joined that training. Coming from the line ministry, OPDs and women with disability, UNCT and civil society organization. the training that take place is organized by UNDP and CDPO. We are follow the training manual provided by the UNPRPD's secretariats, and the participant actively participate and share their working and personal experience and provide the concrete feedback during the training. And UNDP shared also the progress of the disability policies, laws, and strategies, while UNCHR contribute their expertise on human rights and fully participation. I can say early 2021, in collaboration with UNDP and DAC, Disability Action Council, CDPO joined also conduct the situation analysis on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the right and the well-being of persons with disability and their access to services, which identify 7 key issues. Then through the UNPRPD's inception phase, UNCT has updated this situation analysis to be wider consultation with CDPO and 75 OPD and women and children with disability in Cambodia. And also this analysis provide the evidence for UNCTs and the Cambodian governments, and also OPD, the road mapping and the strategy to address the challenges for people with disability. Particularly is the UNCT have been applying for the proposal of for the UNPRPD fund implement across design strategy. I can say remarkably the recovery plan for 21st to 2013 was developed from situation analysis which align with the DSP, National Disability Strategic Plan 2, to support the government as during the barriers to respond the need and the challenges for people with disability during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, CDPO and 15 DPOs and Women and Children with Disability Forum have involved in the development of the advocacy toolkit for the recover plans and for OPDs, and 2 Women and Children with Disability Forum have applied this tool to develop this advocacy plan to advocate for the social support and public services from the local authorities through the UN grant from July to October 2021. Through all the achievement, effective coordination of the UN Cambodia, particularly UNDP and OHCHR, and strong commitment to the Cambodia governments on Disability Action Council during the COVID-19 pandemic from June 20 to September 21st. 61,426 persons with disability access the national cash transfers from the government side. By 24 December 2021, the government has interviewed a person with disability 221,873 persons with disability for identification card. We can say ID card for people with disability, and all the card we issue, the card, the printing the card with disability for people with disability who are, got the disability allowance in 2022. This point is importantly by November 2021, 8,068 persons with disability access employment with both public and private sector in Cambodia, And among that numbers, women with disability, we have 4,204 under that achievement from that project. So with implementation on the UNPRPD round 4 in Cambodia, CDPO and OPD strongly hope that this project will promote the disability rights and inclusive. We have main 3 points. First, about the providing eco support to the responsible government to endorse the new disability laws that is aligned with the UNCRPD. And second one, to provide financial and technical support to CDPOs and OPD to advocate for the need and inclusive participation of persons with disability to access to social protection from the government through the COVID recovery plan implementation. And for the last one, what we are the result from this implementation is to engage the CDPO and OPDs in the decision making for developing any legal document related to disability issue or related to disability rights. Right now, last but not least for me, I would like to thank for taking your time to listen our short summary to reflect on our organization participation in the process of the situational analysis. I would like to great thank you all invitation me to join event. Without your contribute support, we would never be able to reach our goal and disability inclusion. So we're looking forward to seeking for your support for disability movement in Cambodia. Nothing about us without us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monica, for your contribution. And without further ado, because of time limitation, I would like please to give the floor to our colleague Sultan Merisik, United Nations Resident Coordinator at the United Republic of Tanzania. Zaltan will share with us some perspectives from their experience around the multi-stakeholder approach that we use around the situational analysis from their country experience. Thank you so much, Sultan. The floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are in the world. And thank you for giving me the privilege to hear some interesting findings as well as some reflections. Thank you, of course, for inviting me to join you today and share the UN experiences in participatory data collection and analysis for disability inclusion programming in the United Republic of Tanzania. And this includes both the mainland Tanzania as well as Zanzibar. UN in Tanzania was selected for the implementation of the UN Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or UNPRPD, and the inception phase was carried out throughout last year. As per the UNPRPD guidelines, this inception phase involved multiple steps, including induction training and gender-sensitive situation analysis of preconditions for disability inclusion. The process culminated in the development of a UN joint program on disability rights that was approved for implementation in December. The enabling environment has been conducive for ensuring a multi-stakeholder participatory approach throughout the PRPD process in Tanzania. In fact, it was a foundation for the development of a robust program that responds to the national priorities. The government of the United Republic of Tanzania is committed to promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities. This is evidenced by the country's adoption of several national disability policies and laws, the ratification of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and ongoing efforts to ensure its introduction into the updated national legislation and policy frameworks. The umbrella organizations of persons with disabilities, or OPDs, are trusted partners of the government. They were consulted during the development of the ongoing National 5-Year Development Plan and the Zanzibar Midterm Development Strategy, which both address rights of persons with disabilities as a priority to ensure that no one is left behind. Government partnership and commitment was essential for the various stages of the PRPD process. Following the induction training and data collection for the situation analysis, the government was the key participant in the analysis and validation of the collected information and data, and in identifying key focus areas for the UNPRPD program. At the center of the UN government partnership was a mutual understanding of the importance of working towards dismantling the barriers that persons with disabilities face. We know that these barriers often limit opportunities for persons with disabilities throughout their life and can be experienced even more acutely when they intersect with other forms of discrimination, such as gender or age. The 2012 census data from Tanzania shows that persons living with disabilities are less likely to attend school and access information and support services than persons without disabilities. This affects their health and well-being, employment, and other opportunities to support themselves, their families, and the socio-economic development of their communities. Nothing about us without us is the motto famously used by OPDs. For the UN and government in Tanzania, adopting a participatory approach meant collaboration with diverse OPDs from the very beginning of the UNPRPD process. OPDs are representing women, men, girls, and boys, as well as a range of disabilities were dominant partners. They contributed to the planning and organization of the training and other events, provided expertise throughout the situation analysis, and contributed to program design. Together with the government and UN stakeholders, they're also part of the Technical Advisory Committee for the UNPRPD program in Tanzania. Ensuring representative participation in a complex and time-limited process is rarely easy, and the COVID-19 situation added to these challenges. As in many other countries, the pandemic has exposed the inadequacy of the existing infrastructure and services in Tanzania to properly accommodate persons with disabilities. Within the context of pandemic, a large part of data collection for the situation analysis, including interviews and focus group discussions, had to be done via phone and internet. In response, the UN strengthened the use of accessibility features of virtual platforms. The aim was to choose the most accessible form from available options and do the best to make them work. In recognition that persons living with disabilities are not a homogeneous group, we needed conscious efforts to ensure representative participation from across a wide spectrum of experiences. In the Tanzanian context, people living with albinism identify as having a disability and do face specific risks of violence, stigma, and discrimination. Situation analysis documented how persons with certain types of disabilities, such as intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, experience additional barriers in getting their voices heard. Currently, the membership base of organizations representative of persons with disabilities is not inclusive or consultative of all types of disabilities. This, combined with the restrictions inflicted by the COVID-19 for in-person engagement, made it challenging to identify and enroll some of these groups as participants in the study. I'm convinced that we need to make more effort to ensure that persons with disabilities representing wide diversified in impairments meaningfully participate in these types of processes and decision-making. This will therefore be our priority in the implementation of the UNPRPD program in Tanzania. I also wish to highlight women and girls with disabilities. They and particularly in rural areas, encounter multiple challenges and intersecting forms of discrimination, which put them at a higher risk of violence and harmful practices. For the UN, it was important to make extra efforts to facilitate participation of organizations representing women with disabilities in PRPD processes. This involved providing a safe space for inputs through, for example, women-only focus group discussions. These efforts were much needed because the situation analysis found that while the representation of women in, for example, capacity building program has improved, their contribution in decision-making remained limited. Designing a gender transformative UNPRPD program, which contributes to advancing gender equality for persons with disabilities, is another priority for us. We will focus on the prevention and response to violence against women and children with disabilities and their increased participation in decision-making. We will also support strengthening of disability laws and policies from a gender-sensitive lens to ensure that they address the intersectional issues of gender and disability. Finally, allow me to highlight some experiences that we, as the UN system in Tanzania, went to build on in going forward. I strongly believe that disability inclusion should be everybody's business. We are pleased that the UNPRPD inception phase went hand in hand with the increased attention to the implementation of the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy and our finalization of our UN Common Country Analysis and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. These important processes have all applied a multi-stakeholder approach to gender-sensitive disability inclusion with broad involvement of program, communications, and operation colleagues, as well as government and diverse OPD partners. Human resources colleagues from various UN agencies recently came up with new measures to make human resources services more disability inclusive. The aim is that this will lead to more men and women with disabilities being employed at the United Nations. ICT colleagues will examine the UN's IT software and services using a disability inclusive lens. The UNPRPD provides a valuable platform for learning, and UN in Tanzania will continue engagement with diverse OPDs and government partners as we commence the next step for the implementation of the program. I really look forward to learning more from our other participants at this event today about the experiences and perspectives and their solutions for not leaving behind people with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zoltan. We deeply appreciate your support and your office's collaboration with us around the induction phase. And of course, we look forward to continue the collaboration during the implementation phase. The UN resident coordinator offices are really essential to our work because we want to ensure this one UN approach and the collaboration with all national stakeholders. Thanks again for your inputs. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Jacqueline Johnson, the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services at Trinidad and Tobago to discuss how the UNPRPD approach can enable evidence-based inclusive programming design reflecting the country needs. Jacqueline, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Members of the organizing committee, the speakers, my colleagues, I bring you greetings from the beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago. It is indeed my pleasure to share our experience on implementing the United Nations Partnership on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UNPRPD approach to evidence-based inclusive program design here in Trinidad and Tobago. Our country has a population of about 1.3 million people, and it's an estimated 4% of our people live with disabilities. So that brings it roughly to about 52,200 persons. Our country is about to start a joint initiative which will focus on strengthening mechanisms for the effective participation and inclusion of persons with disabilities in the development of legislation, data collection across sectors, improve access to rehabilitation and assistive technology programs, and mainstream disability within the UN's collective response to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This program is a result of a fully participatory process from the onset. A partnership between the government, the UN, and the organizations of persons with disabilities was created at the time of submitting the expression of interest to respond to the Fund's 2020 call. And we kept this participatory mode throughout all the phases of the process, guided by the UNPRPD approach in such matters. The process funded by the UNPRPD involved several phases, and I will briefly outline these phases. The first step that we engaged in was the induction training, where over 70 persons attended a 9-day virtual training workshop. Persons with disabilities participated as facilitators, co-facilitators, trainers, consultants, and participants. This training was designed to ensure everyone had a level understanding of the convention, the disability inclusive SDGs, and the preconditions for disability inclusion. It also assisted our participants to develop an understanding of the cross-cutting approaches and the issues. The second phase involved the preparation of the situation analysis. Following the successful hosting of the induction workshop, participants were eager, motivated, and interested in supporting the development of the situation analysis. Participants provided data, research, and information through an in-depth interview, focus group discussion, and questionnaires. Organizations of persons with disabilities and the UN Convention team jointly refined and finalized the country analysis plan and scope, including data collection and analysis approaches, methods, and tools. The situation analysis process helped us to understand what is most catalytic at the country level and the current hindrances in achieving the convention. The cross-cutting issues impacting persons with disabilities in the public sector, for example, where I work, was well documented. The third phase involved the stakeholder validation process. And while stakeholders provided the information for the situation analysis, a validation session was held to present the outcome of the analysis and gain consensus on the information documented. Again, we were following the steps and the guidance provided by the UN, and that ensured that all stakeholders were aware of the final product and agreed to the content of the document, including the key findings and recommendations. The fourth phase involved the preparation of the full document proposal. Using the evidence from the situation analysis, again, a participatory approach continued in the design of an inclusive program for implementing and tackling the key priorities identified. While the situation analysis identified many gaps, and we've heard a lot of them this morning, a joint prioritizing session was done to select those concrete legislative programs and system changes that could have been addressed through the UNPRPD funding. The last phase involved the stakeholder validation, which was a joint review of the proposal comprising the UN team, the government partners, the OPDs, and other key stakeholders to agree on the prioritized actions. Together, we agreed on the implementing UN agencies and drafted the 2-year program of action. This process, while it seems lengthy and labor intensive, is a true testament of an evidence-based inclusive program design. As a government working towards the fulfillment and the implementation of the convention and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, we are very pleased with this participatory process. Many lessons were learned during the process, but chief among them are: one, that Trinidad and Tobago persons with disabilities have a clear understanding of the issues impeding inclusive program design and have feasible strategies to facilitate improvement. Two, the evidence-based inclusive program design is the way to go, as the key partners are on board from the start, and local evidence is used to formulate the program strategy, thereby meeting the local needs. We do appreciate that the UNPRPD fund, as a donor, has allowed us to tailor the program to our country needs and has guided us through the entire process. One of the things we also learned was that multi-stakeholder engagement and collaboration with the organizations of persons with disabilities, government, NGO, academia, service providing organizations, and the UN are critical ingredients for success. As the previous speakers indicated, as a person, myself, living with a disability, nothing for us without us must always be the refrain as we try to build the rights and the inclusion of persons with disability. I repeat, nothing for us without us. Having the full and active participation of the OPDs from the onset made the process so much easier for us throughout the inception phase. Now that we are moving into the implementation phase, we are all eager to play our part in knowing that the program was designed jointly based on the consensus solidified by the evidence. The government's role, and specifically that of the Ministry of Social Development, has already been identified. In closing, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting Trinidad and Tobago to participate and share in this important event. It is our expectation that other countries, while not being a beneficiary of this grant, should try to utilize the UNPRPD's approach as they work towards achieving the SDGs and creating an inclusive society. This approach secures and solidifies the rights of those who live with disabilities. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for your input, and thank you for all the speakers that presented the reflections from the ground in terms of our approach and how what really worked well, and definitely key learnings for us in the future. Now I would like to give the floor to our kind commentators that will give some reflections on the process and what they heard from countries, starting with our colleague Nick Blisford, the UNDP representative, resident representative in Georgia, to comment on the multi-stakeholder approach and situation country analysis. I would like kindly to ask the commentators to stick to 5 minutes so that we don't exceed the time of the session. Thank you so much. Nick, the floor is yours.
Ola, thank you very much, and good morning, good evening to colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to join you. I'd like to take also opportunity to say thank you to Government of Norway, thank you to Government of Australia and others who have funded this really important work that's having real impact at ground level. So what I'm hearing, and I'm very pleased to hear it, is how the conventions, the rights-based approach then translates through UNPRPD at ground level to results that are having real impact and real impact at scale. Let me start, if I may, also with the remarks from Monica Mack. And before I moved here to Georgia, I was resident representative with UNDP in Cambodia and worked with Monica and worked with her organization, the Cambodian Disabled People's Organization and Disability Council. Some of the work that she has been describing, I think, is a really powerful example of how we can use the convention and how we can use a rights-based approach and the inclusion of the leadership of organizations of persons living with disabilities to get those results. When COVID hit, the government of Cambodia issued a cash transfer program for the first time. More than almost 2 million people at or below the poverty line were given cash transfers that were in large part fully automated and digitized. It was a tremendous effort and a very successful one. But because it had a targeted approach, of course, like all targeted social protection systems, the most vulnerable, the most needy are the ones that are often missed. But thanks to the work of CDPO, as we've just heard, more than 61,000 people living with disabilities at or below the poverty line in Cambodia were successfully registered onto the system and were able to receive the cash transfers to which they were entitled. I think that's a really nice example, not just of the leadership from the organizations with people with disabilities, but the networking between the UN at the ground level, the government, and the civil society organizations. I think that that synergy, those partnerships have real impactful results. Let me turn now to Georgia, where I'm currently the resident representative. So I think on the situation analysis, I've heard from many about how powerful this tool has been and how useful, and I would certainly agree with that. For us, we just finished the situation analysis at the end of last year, and in it, it really made us aware of, more clearly aware of the situations that we are facing. For example, with the data, we can see, for instance, social attitudes. We can see more clearly the barriers that we are facing and need to overcome. For example, we saw that there were much more conservative social attitudes around mental health disabilities and challenges. And this is something where we needed to adjust and to, I think, will strengthen our program. Let me turn also then to the issue of the multi-stakeholder approach. The multi-stakeholder approach and the organization and leadership from organizations with persons with disability has been key. It helped us develop an act which was passed by the government in 2020, which helped open the door to getting the convention to work here in Georgia. But it's not just the multi-stakeholder approach, it's also the way that we can make that connection between the civil society organizations at grassroots and to cabinet ministers, and the UN can be a useful connector in terms of that respect. So just before the end of the year, on the 3rd of December, the government of Georgia held the first interagency coordination committee under the UN Convention. And that meeting was led by the Prime Minister himself. So I think that when we have that powerful senior leadership, it sends a very clear message then to cabinet, it sends a clear message also to organizations and so on. And it really helps us, I think, push the agenda forward that's contained in the convention. My last point I'd just like to make, I'm conscious of the time limit, is that how does that translate also into real events, into ground level issues? We have a parallel program on civil service reform, and in the Civil Service Bureau, we connected the work to this work that we're doing with UNPRPD. The civil service has set up and is in the process of setting up a monitoring system so that they can, for the first time, have data and understanding of the number of civil servants who are people living with disabilities. Secondly, they brought in the policy to try to increase that number so that civil servants are more truly representative of the communities that they serve. But because we had representatives from organizations of persons with disabilities in that process, during the process, it really helped to change attitudes within the civil service, particularly at the senior level. So now they could see that it's not just to be more representative, but it's actually in the self-interest of the civil service. Why? Because you access a wider labor market. You access more talented, hardworking people who can contribute to the civil service by making sure that you're not excluding persons with disabilities when you're looking to recruit for the civil service. So I think that that's also another tangible benefit in how we can also make the connections between the development programs at ground level. I'll leave my remarks there. Thank you, Ola.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you for pointing out your reflections on the importance of our process to bring more awareness and attention to the government officials around the importance of engaging with OBDs, and hopefully that will continue to contribute to their understanding of the importance of adopting that approach even beyond our programs. Allow me now to give the opportunity to my colleague, Dr. Hannah Cooper, who's the Director of the International Center for Evidence in Disability at London School for Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Hannah will give her reflections on the importance of our process of contributing to filling the data gap globally around disability inclusion. Hannah, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm calling from Uganda, so please be understanding if my connection is a little bit unstable. So Ola introduced me, and I'm from a university, the London School of Hygiene, and I'm one of the 2 directors there of the Evidence in Disability Centre. So I'm very committed to evidence and the importance of evidence to improve programming and policies for people with disabilities. And I'll try to explain why. One of my key interests is in health and disability and how to promote inclusive health and the health of people with disabilities. And the global health actors, the big actors, are very important here. But at the moment, many are not yet working on disability. And it's because they don't have the evidence yet to show that there is a need, that there are many people with disabilities with unmet health needs, and to work out how to fill those gaps. So at the moment, they don't have the pressure to make actions towards inclusive health or the knowledge necessarily about what to do. And I'm very passionate that data and evidence can help to fill those gaps and to mobilize partners. And I'm really delighted to see how UNPRPD and the Norwegian co-host today and so on are all really bought into this belief and committed to data. And what this situational analysis has shown is that if data is collected in partnership with the government, then it can show where the gaps are. What are the important things needed for people with disabilities so that it can guide what kinds of actions are needed. And it was inspiring to hear from the country partners about those processes and how effective they are. And what I hope is that this is going to provide inspiration for others on the importance of data. So it's wonderful that UNPRPD is doing this, but can we dream about more people collecting data to highlight what the gaps are for people with disabilities and how they can be filled? And what if that was not always disability agencies, but increasingly government themselves, leading health agencies, mainstream agencies, that in parts of their routine situational analyses, they take inspiration from the UNPRPD to see how also people with disabilities may face gaps that can be addressed through those programs. So most governments and actors don't yet have the data to set those kind of, make those plans to be inclusive. And as was pointed out, another big thing for the future is most governments and actors don't have disaggregated indicators and targets. And so as well as starting to collect that data in their situational analyses, but to also set themselves targets, and both for UNPRPD and others to then recollect the data to see how things have changed, what seems to have worked and what seems not to have worked. So there's lots of work to be done, both in, there's a fantastic start in collecting data and using data, and now for it to guide action and to see what works, what's been effective, and how to encourage this evidence-based approach into mainstream actors also. So thank you very much, Ola and team, for leading this. And I look forward to seeing all the successes that come from your work.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for pointing out the importance of, hopefully, the possibility of our situational analysis reports to contribute to influencing the wider development government thinking in terms of understanding the disability inclusion needs at country level. And we look forward to engage with you on that in the future as well. I would like now to give the floor to my colleague, Jose Vera, the International Disability Alliance, the Advocacy Director at the International Disability Alliance. Ida is a key member of the UNPRPD, but also, as we all know, is a co-host of the Global Disability Summit. And that's why we were really very keen to hear from Jose today about his perspective on our approach, considering the key importance of pushing for global commitments around the importance of engaging with OPDs globally, but specifically also at the national development and policy level within governments around CRPD implementation. Jose, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you, Ola, for having us today. Thanks to all the distinguished panelists for such great presentations. I would like to start by also expressing our sincere appreciation to the government of Norway for co-hosting with the International Disability Alliance, the second Global Disability Summit, together with the government of Ghana, and also for the government of Australia for not only supporting many of the activities around meaningful engagement of OPDs, but in particular, and in regards to the Global Disability Summit, for being one of the co-hosts of the Regional Satellite Summit for the Pacific. I think those two examples show the high interest from both governments to support the central role that OPDs should be playing in this field. Ola, you rightly mentioned the Global Disability Summit that is just less than 2 weeks away, is trying not only to capture those lessons learned from the first Global Disability Summit, but also trying to go one step farther. And I think in this objective of going one step farther, there have been many elements that we have been collecting over the last 12 months that realizes the importance of more meaningful engagement of OPDs if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to be, in a way, CRPD compliant. And I think the UNPRPD in all its programs and in the different ways that the UNPRPD is engaging with UNCTs and with OPDs at the national level is a clear example of how we from the International Disability Alliance understand OPDs can not only be the organization of persons with disabilities that represent our interests and demands, but also how much is needed to realize that OPDs can also be key partners for implementing inclusive programming. In other words, I think what we are trying to once again share with the donor community, with the disability rights movement, is how important is that we continue delivering our projects and programs with the guiding principle that OPDs should be at the center and not just now in the role of consultation or in the role of hearing our perspectives, our voices, but also becoming partners when implementing projects. And I really want to take this opportunity to at least highlight two aspects of the Global Disability Summit and how this event tried to reinforce this idea of more meaningful engagement of OPDs. The first element is that, as you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how critically important would have been to have more evidence and data around persons with disabilities, especially in the emergency response plans that took place in many countries. It is clearly recognized that those countries who had in the past managed to collect better evidence and data around persons with disabilities were better prepared and more equipped to respond to persons with disabilities and their demands within the COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, those people with disabilities that were definitely left behind in the emergency response plan, one of the main factors was the lack of evidence and data around persons with disabilities. And that can include from accessing to healthcare services, to financial support programs, education, etc., etc. And the second element that I would like to bring your attention to in the context of the Global Disability Summit is one of the key component of this Global Disability Summit, and that is meaningful engagement of OPDs. We have tried, together with the government of Norway and the government of Ghana, to raise the need of OPD engagement to the level of an overarching goal. And that means that we recognize that the only way forward to implement the CRPD and the SDGs, in particular at the national level, is by promoting more OPD participation and engagement. And IDA will be, in the context of the Global Disability Summit, launching a discussion paper that addressed actually the need of more OPD participation. And it's interesting to see that for this paper, we have received over 100 case studies showing the different initiatives, some of which are coming from UNPRPD projects, that speaks to how important are OPDs taking a leading role in implementing different projects. But also this discussion paper reflects on what are the recommendations that countries, multilateral agencies, private sector, civil society, and including OPDs can consider when improving the engagement of OPDs at both national and international level. And some of those recommendations are reflected in the commitments that we expect governments and multi-stakeholders will make at the Global Disability Summit. But above all, those recommendations are around improving accessible and inclusive access to data and evidence for persons with disabilities. Other recommendations are basically targeting the need for more funding for OPDs, especially at the national level, to be more effective in engaging with governments and UN agencies. And a third big component of this recommendation package is around securing that those underrepresented groups and most marginalized groups are given the space needed to ensure meaningful participation. In closing, by increasing the funding towards OPDs, by promoting inclusive and accessible programming, especially in regards to inclusive development, and by securing that not only General Comment number 7 is a reality, but also by working in collaboration, like many initiatives of the UNPRPD projects, we can secure that events like the GDS can even promote further the idea of nothing about us without us. I thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Jose, for your contribution and confirmation of the importance of the engagement of OPDs in all processes, including our programs and beyond, which is really a key cornerstone adopted at our strategy, and this approach on situational analysis is one of them. Thank you so much for that. Now I would like to hand in the floor to our colleague Brigitta Weber, who is the lead policy specialist at the Democracy and Human Rights Policy Support Unit at SIDA. Brigitta will give us her reflections on the country relevance, evidence-based inclusive program design, and how far our approach could be contributing to meeting the GDS commitments. Brigitta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ola, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It has indeed been encouraging and inspiring to listen to all of you. such an interesting mix of colleagues adding important and very complementary experiences and perspectives. We know for a fact, and this was emphasized by, for example, Annika, that there is a lack of data on persons with disabilities, and that persons with disabilities are often not included in data collection, national planning and budgets, and therefore left behind. And for that reason, working data-driven and evidence-based for disability inclusion using innovative and participatory approaches is obviously worth investing in and a way forward to meet the Global Disability Summit commitments, which means meeting human rights and SDG commitments, of course. And for that reason, Sweden and SIDA very much appreciates the new updated UNPRPD strategy and operational plan. We agree with the new elements of the strategy and the plan, making the country level and the needs the point of departure, improvement of sustainability and design by focusing on data and evidence, and a more explicit focus on the preconditions of CRPD and the SDG implementation. And we're confident that these new elements will assist to ensure that the UNPRPD and the UNDP and other UN agencies and partners that implement the programs can work more efficiently and effectively. You've invested a lot of work in developing the situational analysis and country briefs. It's quite obvious that they are useful in filling important gaps of data and coordination, and that they will be crucial in the implementation of the programs to come. I also hope that these analyses will be used beyond the intended work of the UNPRPD, and that you will share them extensively with various stakeholders, working with inclusion of persons with disabilities. Excuse me. I would in particular like to commend the UNPRPD for its innovative induction phase of the call for proposals process, including the training of the relevant stakeholders, which in the end underpins the proposals with a joint vision based on evidence and reflecting actual needs at country level. Part of the innovative induction phase is also the approach of participation and influence of CSOs and especially OPDs. It's after all the proposals once approved that will define the work on the ground. Lastly, I would like to comment on sustainability. Working evidence-based obviously contributes to sustainability, and so does applying a human rights-based approach, also emphasized by both opening speakers and others. The UNPRPD obviously apply a human rights-based approach in their work. And the most difficult principle to apply is perhaps accountability, getting those responsible for realizing human rights, the duty bearers, to actually carry on with their obligations. Hopefully the UN agencies and others can use these situational analysis also beyond the UNPRPD proposals and programs in advocacy work and dialogue, trying to influence government officials and representatives to do their job. To round up, the message to the UNPRPD is continue to think and work evidence and country-based and use innovative methods, always applying a human rights-based approach to development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brigitta, for your kind remarks. And thank you for CEDA for also its continuous support to our work. As you pointed out, I would like to use some of your points to close for today. We are really very pleased to hear from you and others about the importance of the work we have done around the new strategy to build the induction phase. We are very committed as PRPD to continue learning from this phase and advancing the approach even further to make it accessible and reachable and adaptable to the country context. We are also committed to continue that our new programs forward will be continuously based on evidence, collective understanding, and agreement from all actors, including, of course, essentially the organizations of persons with disabilities. And with regards to the data that gathered, it will be openly available on our website soon once all reports and summaries are available, because as you said, Brigitte, we want this data to be used as much as possible beyond our programs. And we will be sharing it also within the participants of our session today once ready. To close, I would like to thank so much our partners, UNDP colleagues, our sponsors, and CIF specifically for taking the time to be with us today. And we hope that the commitments around the summit will reach the ambition we all want. And as PRPD, we will continue to commit to support the realization of those commitments at country level in collaboration with everybody. Thank you all, and thanks to the speakers to their contributions today, and thanks for the participants to take the time to continue to be with us. Looking forward for future engagements. Thank you all. Bye-bye.